Hey, what's up guys, Bajheera here, bringing you some more 2500 plus Turbo Cleave 3v3 arena matches. Our first match is up against another Turbo Cleave running with a Mystery Monk, and that doesn't change our offensive setup all that much. We're still going to try to hit the Warrior when he's not in D stance, and then of course the Shaman mostly. What it does change, however, is our defensive awareness. We have to look out for the Monk rolling across the map like he's doing right here for a sap or incapacitate into a leg sweep. So I'm going to go ahead and fear him on that. He actually trinkets that to get the leg sweep. So even though he eventually got the CC he's looking for, he had to use his trinket to get it. Another important setup that you're going to be looking for as Turbo Cleave is whenever they're popping all of their offensive cooldowns, it's usually with a stun. You can pop Bloodlust, Doomwinds, Battle Cry, that sort of thing. You need to make sure and disarm the Shaman and duel the Warrior. That's usually what I do. Disarming the Warrior is also an option, but Warriors can Blade Storm out of a disarm, and the Warrior we're fighting is also a human, so he can actually trinket the disarm and be just fine. So I usually just decide to disarm the Shaman and duel the Warrior, and hit the Warrior during the duration of that duel. In terms of our offensive goals, like I said, we're trying to keep the Warrior in D stance as much as possible to limit his damage, and outside of that, we're trying to do as much damage as we can to the Shaman. The Shaman's probably going to be playing Ethereal form, which means that every 45 seconds he can become immune to all physical damage, which is a little bit annoying. So don't be afraid to swap to targets like the healer, for example, without a trinket. So we got his actual PvP trinket, but he still has his human trinket, so he was able to get out of that stun and get behind the pillar before we globaled him there. But keep in mind that as Turbo Cleave, you're pretty much able to kill a lot of different targets. It's just a matter of what can you set up on the most easily. So things that don't have trinkets, things that don't have defensive cooldowns, things that don't have sort of damage reduction on them like Earth Shield or defensive stance. Setting up on them with stuns and popping your offensive cooldowns can force a lot of defensives. In that situation, we didn't even need to use offensive cooldowns to force the Shaman's Ethereal form there. All that took was our basic every 30-second setup, which is Stormbolt and Sharpened Blade. Ideally, as Turbo, you're going to want to use those off cooldown. Obviously, setting up your burst with your teammate is extremely important, so be sure to communicate, you know, my Stormbolt's up, my Sharpened Blade's up, so you guys can be on the same page and get the most out of those offensive pressure opportunities. And you'll see here, one of the fun things about playing with a Holy Priest is they have an undispellable 5-second stun. So a lot of times you can just have your Priest stun the DPS for you, and then you go ahead and Stormbolt out. So it's a really long stun. And if you stack cooldowns on top of that, obviously you're going to force some serious defensives from the enemy team or just end up landing a kill. So right here, things actually get kind of sketchy. I mean, we're playing against Turbo Cleave. There's a lot of damage coming our way as well, so you have to play a little bit defensively just to avoid dying to their cooldowns or dying to pressure. So when you're out of defensive cooldowns yourself, I mean, Turbo Cleave is a melee cleave, so you can definitely use your cutting to your advantage there. And in previous Turbo Cleave commentaries, I've described Turbo as a counterpunch composition. So I'm talking a lot about, you know, forcing pressure, target selection, that sort of thing. But I also understand it's important that the way Turbo Cleave works is that when an enemy team goes for offensive pressure, if you have your go as well, if you have your Stormbolt, your Sharpened Blade, your offensive cooldowns ready, a lot of times you can turn things around. So this is a situation in which they would like to be forcing offensive pressure, and we're able to land our combo instead, and pretty much just end the game as a result of it. So when you're playing Turbo Cleave, especially in a mirror situation, you already have some understanding of what Turbo Cleave wants to do, and if you're able to prevent that and turn things around, it's going to definitely help that game go in your advantage. This is going to be a second example of that, playing up against another Turbo Cleave that is playing with a Resto Druid healer. So they're going to start off with a Fear on our healer, which is going to sit full, but they actually decide to hold their cooldowns and try to land a Cyclone on my Shaman. They get the Cyclone on my Shaman, and since I was in battle stance, they decide to hit me mostly. I do get the D stance off before the Shockwave, which is going to allow me to get out of there just fine. I'm going to disarm the Shaman, I'm going to Fear their Resto Druid, and now we have a chance to go offensive on our own. Notice that every single person on the enemy team is trinketed here, so every offensive opportunity that we have from now on could very well be a good one, especially because the enemy team's Druid trinketed. So the Druid, we don't have the same issue that we had with the Monk, where the Monk trinketed my Fear, but still had a human trinket to get out of our stuns. The Druid does not have a human trinket to get out of our stuns, so basically we just have to bide our time and keep making swaps to the Druid. So I made a very small mistake here. I decided to use my Colossus Smash proc on the Warrior to deal damage, but ideally I should have saved it for this swap to the Druid. So you'll notice that even though I get rooted there, if I had Colossus Smash, the Druid very well could have died in this, because I think I would have had a little bit more damage on him, and I would have got him in execute range and probably executed him there. So our go on the Druid right now is a little bit mitigated. We're going to get Hex Totem there. So at this point, the best bet is for us to sort of stay ready to mitigate the enemy's offensive pressure, and get ready to swap back to the Druid whenever my Stormbolt's back up, which is not that long from now, because our next offensive pressure could probably end the game. So we got to pay attention here. The enemy team's Druid comes into Cyclone, our Priest probably, because my Shaman's getting a little bit low, but that allows us to catch him in a Stormbolt and just evaporate him with all of our cooldowns. So that's pretty much the exact setup that we were looking for there, is to continue to pressure the Druid over and over and over. And obviously, I mean, the enemy team, like I said, it's Turbo Cleave mirrors are going to be fast-paced games, and, you know, really high damage will happen. So we had to watch out to make sure that my Shaman didn't get globaled in that moment, because once we saw that Druid trinket, we pretty much knew that that game should be ours, as long as we play defensively at the right moments and continue to make swaps to the Druid. One of the reasons I like Turbo Cleave is because even though it is a, you know, double melee composition, you don't have to just train one target the entire game. I think Turbo Cleave actually, because of the way it deals damage, really lends itself to making swaps, and I think this next game is a good example of that. So, just to elaborate on that point a little bit, Turbo Cleave's consistent damage is pretty significant, and it's just compounded by some pretty insane bursts. So, we actually decide to continue that strategy of going healer in the beginning. So I just leap across the map, Stormbolt the Pally, Colossus Smash, Sharpened Blade, Mortal Strike, and Blade Storm the leg sweep. I just didn't want to get peeled at all, which allows us to get bubble right off the bat. So now we have to recover, because even though we got a big defensive cooldown out of the enemy team, leaving a Windwalker Monk and a Frost Mage alone is really, really scary. So at this point, we need to get on this mage to try to limit the CC they're doing, and obviously deny him the ability to free cast. A free casting mage is something that you do not want on the enemy team, but we still have our eyes on the Paladin. We did get bubble. He's using adaptation, which does not help him against Stormbolt at all. So we look to go back to the Paladin here. We're able to connect briefly, but the Monk this time, since they don't have Blade Storm, is able to peel us pretty well with Fist of Fury. And now I'm stuck in Frozen Orb with a mage with Icy Veins pelting my Shaman, so I really don't like that. I'm going to leap over. I'm going to Warband of the Hodge because I know that there's going to be CC out of those polymorphs. Fortunately, the shorter duration on the Hodge allows my Shaman to get a Ray of Hope and eventually survive a pretty scary situation. So our first go on the Paladin was really good. Our second go on the Paladin was not so good, but we are going to be able to catch the mage in a Stormbolt, immediately purge that bot. It did save his life there for a moment, but at least we forced the wings out of the Paladin and got one other cooldown of the Paladin, which was the Bob. So, once again, the goal here for us, even though we did start on the Paladin to get defensive cooldowns, is mostly with the mage in the meanwhile. Whenever we have big offensive cooldowns up, in terms of, like, available, we can decide which target we want to swap onto. I think a lot of times, you know, obviously hitting the mage is really good. I mean, we're going to hit him with a Stormbolt, Sharpened Blade, and in that we're going to get a block. And that was without any cooldowns from us. We didn't use Lust, we didn't use Doom Winds, anything. He cancels the block since his Paladin used Hand of Sack on him. So he's going to be okay for a little while. None of the damage that we deal is actually going to stick. But this is going to be a scary situation for us. I wanted to try to fear the mage and the Windwalker, but I was only able to catch the Windwalker in my fear there because I really needed to peel. But fortunately, the Windwalker did trinket that, so if we're able to survive this right here, the Windwalker now has opened themselves up as a target to swap to. The Windwalker still has Touch of Karma, but you can't use Touch of Karma in a stun, and that's something that we are going to put to very good use there. I mentioned that Holy Priest has a Undispellable Stun, so you can either stun into Stormbolt, or you can do what we did there, which is Stormbolt into Priest Stun. So the Monk never had a chance to use Touch of Karma. So just to break that game down again, we start on the Paladin and get Bubble. We use 2 goes on Mage to get Bop and Ice Block. And then as soon as that Monk trinkets, we're able to go with all of our offensive cooldowns and kill him in a Stormbolt and then a Holy Priest stun. So pretty neat swap game. I like that one. Speaking of swap games, we have this composition, which has Turbo Cleave, 2 Clothies, and a Shaman. Looks pretty good to fight against, but it can still be pretty scary. My main recommendation against this composition is to swap on Earth Shield. I mean, both targets are going to take a fair amount of damage, but if they have Earth Shield on them, I mean, you're just kind of hitting into mitigation for free. And if you have enough mobility to jump between these 2 targets, you can definitely do a lot of pressure. So right now, he has Earth and Shield down. He has Earth Shield on the Priest, so the best thing for us to do is just go on the lock. I did use my charge there. I probably should have just walked to the lock instead of charging, but fortunately I had Leap to follow it up. And we get a Stormbolt on the lock, which is going to swap Earth Shield over to the lock, which means that, hey, going back on the Shadow Priest. Keep in mind that in the beginning of the game, with all of our offensive cooldowns, we were able to force Disperse out of the Shadow Priest, so he's not going to have that available for some time now. This strategy also puts a lot of pressure on the enemy team's healer, since the Shaman won't be able to just throw Earth Shield on a target and heal with Riptide and then use Purge to heal or deal damage. So the swapping on Earth Shield strategy has a lot of different advantages, and this is a strategy that you guys probably want to use against a lot of Shaman teams. Hitting the target without Earth Shield is generally a good idea, so he's going to swap Earth Shield pretty quickly here, and one thing we could have done better, is waited until I had Heroic Leap, because what we wanted to do there was hit the lock to keep Urshield in the lock and fear the Shaman, stun the Priest without Urshield and do damage there to try to get a kill. So unfortunately for us, just should have been a little bit more patient, because we could have ended the game there, and instead we end up having to use a lot of defensive cooldowns on me. I went D-stance, I parried, I rallied, and we had to use Ray of Hope just to barely keep me alive there. So that swap could have been a lot better if we were just a little bit more patient with that. I had a couple seconds left on Leap, but fortunately we're still able to get a ton of damage done. We got Disperse and Spirit Link overlapped, but at the same time we are all really low health, so things are getting pretty scary. I definitely want to reunite with my team behind the pillar there, so I'm going to look for a way to charge the lock, get around the pillar. I have a lot of rage, so I throw some whirlwinds out just to try to get my little artifact weapon to proc and heal me a bit. Fortunately, we are able to recover our health behind the pillar, and we're also going to come out of that situation with not a lot of defensive cooldowns, but a whole lot of offensive pressure. So we're seeing Urshield on the lock right now, which is exactly what we want, which allows us to go in the Shadow Priest. I kick him on to Shadow. He doesn't have Disperse anyway, but we're going to hit him with a stun, swap into Battle Stance, drop the Sharpened Blade on him, kill through 1 health bar, he life swaps, we still have enough damage to kill through a 2nd health bar. So to be fair, our Priest did a super good job of stunning and then MCing the enemy team Shaman while we had the Priest locked down, but there's not a whole lot to say about that kind of damage. I mean, we really cranked it out in that situation, but I think that game could have ended a little earlier if I was just a little bit cleaner on the swap. But hey, there's always something to learn when you do threes, and that's one of the reasons why I like making these videos, because it helps me learn, and hopefully it helps you guys learn as well. So if you enjoy these videos, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Peace!